Joining us now, former Vancouver Canucks Assistant General Manager, NHL Executive, Mr. Laurence Gilman. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you guys today?
Yeah, very well. We noted the GM's meetings are underway. More on some of the issues that came up there in a moment. But first and foremost, you watched the Canucks game last night. What do you think of the victory over the Flames?
Well, they came out like a lamb, but ended like a lion, which was good. I mean, the first 10 minutes, I thought they got badly outplayed, but they seemed to get their footing midway through the first period and then absolutely dominated them in the second, and I would say cruised to victory through the third.
What did you make of? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, do you remember worrying about those games where it's a scheduled loss for the Flames? Like you have to take care of the Flames if you're the Canucks. But they make them play the games, and you just never know. Like, do you worry that the players convince themselves, it's a tired team, we're going to walk on them? And how hard is it to get that team, over the barrel when you just should beat them?
Well, that's the coach's job, right?
Yeah.
The coach needs to have the players ready to play from the first drop of the puck when the game starts. And yes, it's easy to say they're going to be tired, and you can convince yourself, they'll be less tired because they moved from time zones from this mountain time zone to the Pacific, so that allowed them an extra night's sleep. You can convince yourself that it's even better for you if you're sitting and waiting and the team played an hour in the time zone earlier and loses an hour. I mean, we used to look at all that stuff in terms of planning our travel. But at the end of the day, these are top conditioned athletes and the best hockey players in the world. And if you aren't on your game, you could lose even if they're playing second half of a back-to-back, or your opponent is playing the second half of the back-to-back, or their third game in 4 nights. Yeah, you have to come to play in this league if you want to win. So would I have been concerned about their start? Yes, but I would have felt better about it by the end of the first period.
Jonathan Lekramaki recalled he played his first NHL game. I'd like your take on the decision to recall him, and just bigger picture, Laurence. How do you know when it's time to call up a ballyhooed prospect like that?
Well, you never know at the end of the day when is the right time. I mean, I think having him play there last year to get acclimated to the North American game was obviously a good thing. I am a huge proponent in letting players stay longer than they probably would like in lower leagues, because they grow and they get stronger and they understand the game, and they're far more, ready-made when they finally step into the NHL roster. I mean, this guy's not a kid. He's 23 years old. He's played with men in leagues, in overseas. And, the American Hockey League is a very tough league. Everybody who goes through that league, whether it's a player, 50 goal scorer in junior, or even coach, thinks they're going to breeze through it. And then they get there and they find out that there's, 33-year-old, grizzled defensemen that are 6'4" and physical, and you have to get through them to get to the net. And it's not, easy. In this guy's case, I mean, obviously he got off to a great start. 7 games, 5 goals, 2 assists. I did notice he was -6 in 7 games, which gave me a little bit of concern for his attention to detail in the defensive zone. But I liked what I saw last night. I mean, he's obviously skilled. He's got great hands. You could see in that first shift when he made that play at the blue line to advance from the defensive zone to the neutral zone. He's got a great shot. He plays with confidence. And what I liked about him was he kept seeking open ice the entire game. And that's a sign of a guy who knows how to play hockey and knows how to play hockey with good players. And obviously he was playing with good players last night in JT Miller and Pius Suter, and he didn't look out of place at all. In fact, I thought he looked really good for an opening audition game. I'd be very happy with what I saw if I were in management there.
Is it easier or harder for a skill guy to make the transition compared to a plumber?
Well, it's easier for anybody to make the transition when you're playing with skilled players, because skilled players get you the puck, or they're in open ice. When you're a bottom 6 forward, you probably want to simplify things a lot more. Win the puck battles along the boards and potentially behind the net, get the puck out of the defensive zone, get it over the red line, advance it into the offensive zone, and then forecheck. Like, it's a different role. And like I said, you want to simplify things a lot more when you're a less skilled player than a more skilled player. More skilled players, it's just intuitive to them,
He's not a heavy player by any stretch. Do you worry about that even in today's modern game? I mean, he wasn't too dissimilar back in the day when you guys decided, no, Chris Tanev's ready to play NHL hockey, and he was pretty slight. He was pretty small. Slight anyway, not small per se. And you let him get pasted out there, and we know how that turned out. I mean, what gives you the confidence the guy's going to be able to withstand the NHL too?
Well, because he's smart. He's got good hockey sense, and he knows, not only does he know where to go, but he seems to know where not to go to put himself in position to get hit. Look, there are lots of smaller players that play in the National Hockey League. They just have to have great situational awareness and know, who they're on the ice with from the opposition side, and not put themselves into vulnerable positions where they can really get hurt. And based on what I saw, as I said earlier, this guy's a really smart hockey player and knows where to be and equally where not to be on the ice at certain situations.
The GM's meetings, as mentioned, are underway, and one of the things that was brought up was a reminder about tampering, Laurence. And I know you have some thoughts and even some experiences here with tampering. Pray tell.
Well, I think the important thing, the league doesn't want free agency. They don't want the appearance of impropriety, and they don't want a mockery to be made of it. And there are times, and again, I have experienced this, where, the bell rings for free agency at whatever the case is, 12 noon, and suddenly a team holds up an incredibly complex contract that has massive amounts of signing bonus with a very detailed schedule that miraculously, got negotiated in the 30 seconds that it took to, email it to the agent. And as I said, we witnessed that in Vancouver when we made clear to Matthias Ohlund, we made a difficult decision that we weren't going to bring Matthias back, and informed him as such. And he signed one of those types of deals with Tampa Bay, literally seconds into the free agency period. So I think the league, I think it's not a question, I think, of teams complaining that they're losing players, although, I'll give you another instance. After we lost the Stanley Cup in 2011, the draft was in Minnesota, and we had, plethora of defensemen to re-sign, Kevin Bieksa being one, and one was Christian Ehrhoff, who had just had a spectacular season. And we were talking about keeping the defenseman in the same range that Alex Edler was, or below Edler. He was our cap. So we were looking to get these guys in and around $5.5 million. And our message had been consistent throughout. And I met with Christian Ehrhoff's agent at the draft, and he presented to me a contract structure that he would accept, which was so far beyond what we had been speaking about and so complex in its own right, with massive amounts of signing bonus and incredible term, that it was evident to us that he had negotiated this deal with another team and was just bringing it back to us as a courtesy. And I think that's the sort of thing that the league wants to do away with, and quite frankly, they should.
Doesn't a 48-hour cooling off period do that? Like, they had that for a year, maybe 2 years, where they had the 1 week thing. You don't even need a week though. With the calendar getting larger and the Stanley Cup being awarded like July 15th or something, But make it 48 hours. Then the appearance, whether that works or not, is kind of neither here nor there. But for appearance's sake, well, you could have negotiated that, I suppose, in 48 hours. So doesn't that just take care of the optics at least?
A little bit, but the reality is, like, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. and a lot of these deals, and I have, without naming any other names, I have been involved in situations where we just knew that this guy had a deal from another team, that it had been in the works for months and months. And when it came time to negotiate the contract with our player, his demands were so far beyond our expectations, and they were given to us with such confidence that it was evident that the deal had been framed a long time before July 1st.
The other thing that came up at these GM meetings is term limits. And of course, we have seen that already put in place in the CBA with 8 years for a player that you own already, 7 years for a new free agent as the max. Is there a case to be made? I mean, of course that helps GMs. Of course that helps clubs. Why on earth would the NHLPA go along with this?
Well, they shouldn't. I mean, like, it's so funny, you know, it's like it took the GMs and the teams 20 years to figure out the salary cap, you know, and now they're looking to get protection from themselves, really. You know, they've learned the value of cap space. That cap space might be the most valuable commodity that a team has. Sure, you've got to draft players well, and you've got to develop well, and you've got to trade well. But if you have cap space, you can do amazing things, all kinds of different things. And, you know, there are instances where a team would, you know, like, you can't suck and blow at the same time. Like, there are instances where a team, like Edmonton, for example, is thrilled that they had Connor McDavid under a certain contract for 8 years. I'm sure Chicago will be equally happy to sign Connor Bedard to an 8-year term. It's the older free agent guys that you know, when there's an auction on July 1st, like there was with John Tavares, where, you know, the reason you're getting that guy, I mean, the agent says it's not negotiable. You're paying him a max term of 7. And, you know, you have to, if you want the player, you have to pay. And the GMs would love that number to be reduced to, I don't know, 6, 5, whatever, so that they don't have to deal with the out years of a declining asset. Where the NHLPA stands on that, I can't see why they would want, you know, to see sort of shorter term limits. They fought tooth and nail to you know, keep them out in the you know, the original collective bargaining agreement that it was instituted in. I'm not sure, I can't recall which one it was, but it's going to be a tough sell for the players to accept that.
Well,
what's in it for them?
What's in it for them?
Well, so, okay, let me bring that up, and you've alluded to it. You've touched on it already, Laurence. I came across a post from a gentleman named Kyle Stitch who does some work at AFP Analytics and has a podcast, went to Columbia University for sports analytics. And he writes, owners looking to reduce max term contracts is wild. They would voluntarily be giving players more chances at signing new contracts, which in a rising cap would likely mean similar or greater salaries with each new contract. The best way for sports teams to generally capture surplus contract value is to lock young players into long-term contracts that can't be renegotiated, staying consistent in value while the cap and salaries increase. Capping length at 10 to 12 years would be ideal for teams, in my opinion. What do you think? Because the scenario you paint with Tavares, it's just about discipline, right? It's just about whether you've got the managerial discipline to say, yeah, I am not going to 7 years for that player because I don't think he's going to age particularly well. Whereas with the young player, I mean, add more years. Every year could be helpful to your cap situation.
Discipline isn't something that has generally been exhibited by people running.
Very true. Very true.
Over the course of history. Yes,
it is an available tool, though, Laurence.
Well, listen, there are extremely disciplined general managers and some extremely well-run teams. So I'm not, you know, not criticizing the entire industry or the people in it, but there have been some mistakes that get made. And as I like to say, the biggest mistakes that get made are errors of commission, not errors of omission. Mm-hmm. Getting back to what you stated about, you know, the guy who wrote the article that you referred to, it's all good in theory if you're right. Like, if you guess right that the young player, you know, is that Connor Bedard is going to evolve into Connor McDavid, then yes, you would like to go as long as possible. And as far as letting a player go back to the well, like one player I've dealt with, Austin Matthews, he's rejected max contracts twice now and has benefited from it. The risk that you take, though, when you do that is you could get injured significantly at some point along the way. And I mean, who knows, it could be career ending, and it could, you know, impact your ability to maximize your earnings. I mean, I think in the case of Austin Matthews, he'll be doing okay no matter what happens going forward. But it's the reason the GMs want it is because it's the contracts of older players that can kill you. You know, you look at that Andreas Athanasiou, you know, Chicago signs him to a contract $4.5 million and realized it was a mistake. put him on waivers. Nobody claims him. Now he's in the minors. Like, to have that and have it with a player who's on a multi-year deal, it's like an albatross. And I mean, it's a different example because it's just a guy on a 1-year contract, but term can kill you on some of these deals. You look at players they become untradeable, and they're eating up cap space, which is impacting your ability to field an efficient roster.
The restrictions on the 35-plus contracts, how about you move that down? Or maybe you get it a little bit more restricted and make it 32-plus. Anybody 32-plus, you can't sign for more than 3 years, no bonuses, et cetera, et cetera. Well, or only bonuses there.
Again, if I'm a player, why would I accept
Yeah.
Like, what's in it for us on that one? And to be very honest with you, I don't think those contracts have really impacted the league in an adverse way or impacted too many teams. And in fact, it gives you leverage over the players because you say, I can only sign you to a 1-year deal because if not, you're going to be on my cap forever, no matter what happens. So, and the other thing I would say is the fitness level of players has never been higher than it is today. And you can have players playing past 35 that are still contributing. So I just think that's really a non-issue. At this stage.
Here's a good exercise, guys. How many paralyzingly bad contracts are there in the NHL today? There's very few left. I mean, you can make an argument for a guy like Huberdeau. If he doesn't step up in Calgary, it will become that. But there used to be so many examples. I think, Laurence, almost one per roster, where you'd be like, "Oh, that's an albatross." By reducing it to 8 years, I think you have taken away the terrible, terrible contract. No.
Yeah, well, there aren't that many guys. If a player has the leverage to get an 8-year contract, he's not going to be that bad. He's going to be a better player in the upper echelon. I do think that, again, going back to my statement earlier, I think that general managers and people running these teams have gotten educated over the years and are far more cautious and put more stock in the advice and the counsel of the people that are negotiating their contracts, monitoring their cap, and explaining and articulating why it would be a massive mistake to sign this, fifth defenseman to a 5-year contract at 33 years of age, or whatever the case is.
And if that's the case, and particularly with a better understanding via data and sports science of a player's prime and how players age and things and things like that, I would ask, and this is just GM spitballing. I understand this is GM spitballing. This is not the league and its owners going to the PA with a CBA construct. But, to ask for lower term limits, to ask for changes to salary arbitration, which would be team beneficial, which was also on the list of what they talked about, to talk about expanding buyout rights and updating walkaway thresholds from salary arbitration. That turns into a lot of asks of the PA and a lot of givebacks in other areas if Marty Walsh and the PA can negotiate effectively. I looked at that list from the GMs and went, okay, if they go for the whole shooting match here, I would worry about another labor interruption. What's your sense? Do you think this is just GM spitballing about here's what we would love to see in a perfect world? Or do you think the league and its owners, taking counsel from the GMs, will go hardline on some of these things in the next year?
Well, I saw Bill Daly's comment to Pierre LeBrun regarding the term limit issue. Like he said, it's not a high priority for us. So, I mean, I think the league, does a good job of listening to the general managers, allowing them to put forth their opinions. But at the end of the day, and I think they'll canvass GMs on an individual basis as well. But I think that Gary Bettman, Bill Daly, and their staffs have a pretty good finger on the pulse of what are the bellwether issues. And, some of the things that you talked about, like final offer salary arbitration, which is what baseball has, where it's an either or thing, I think is a far better system anyway. Because what happens in the current system in the National Hockey League, because it's not final offer, NHL teams will artificially dampen their offers to make them so low as possible that it's ridiculous. And agents in the NHLPA, on the other hand, will make them so unbelievably arbitrarily high that it puts the arbitrators in a terrible spot.
It's not genuine.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not
exactly.
genuine.
And the other thing that happens is, feelings. There are sore feelings about it, right? Because that offer is so low from
It forces
the club.
more realism the
No,
other way.
I hear what you're saying.
It does, and it forces less players to go because you look at it, and teams too. It's like, you know what? Like, we could lose this. Like, let's just cut the deal. You know what I mean? Like, it gets you to the bargaining table a lot faster.
Well, here's what I say, and I think you're absolutely right, Laurence, and Blake as well, in talking about how many terrible contracts there are around the league. And I think it's been guys like you with your specific expertise in front offices that have led to this. Contracts like we had here with Louis Eriksson, contracts and buyouts like Minnesota has with Ryan Suter and Zach Parise, it's just demoralizing for fans. So if we can have fewer of those going forward, I think it would be more enjoyable for the fans to take an interest in the cap and the CBA and the sorts of things that a lot of fans just don't want to touch, but understand it's a reality of the situation of being a fan these days and understanding where your team's at and where it's going. Marvelous stuff, my friend. You've made us smarter again. Thank you, Laurence. We'll catch up next week.
See you next week, guys.